Hello, everyone. Today is my great pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Matías del Campo. Matías is an architect, PhD in architecture, designer, and educator. He's an associate professor of the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, University of Michigan, director of the Architecture and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at the University of Michigan, and an affiliated faculty member of the Michigan Robotics. Matías is the co-founder of the architecture studio SPAN. His award-winning architectural designs are based on advanced geometry, computational methodologies, and philosophical research. Most recently, he has published ID Machine Hallucinations, Architecture and Artificial Intelligence, and his book, Neural Architecture, Design and Artificial Intelligence. Today, we are honored to have Matías with us to present his latest book here in the Institute of Architecture, Diffusions in Architecture, his new book. Matías explored in this book the intersection of artificial intelligence and architecture, particularly through the use of diffusion models. His book helped us to understand the intricate relationships between AI language and architectural imagination, advocating for the future where technology enhances and transforms the architectural design process. But I won't spoil any more of the book, so I will let no wait any longer and give our attention to Matías. So thank you very much for being with us, Matías.
Thank you very much, Fede, for the generous introduction. I have to thank you and Santiago for the generous invitation to speak to the Instituto de Arquitectura. I apologize that I'm not doing this lecture in Spanish. My Spanish is very, very rusty. You probably wouldn't be very much entertained listening to it, or very much entertained, one of the two. Yeah, let's go into the middle of things. So we're going to discuss today the recently published book, Diffusions in Architecture, Artificial Intelligence and Image Generators, which basically focuses on diffusion models and their resulting ontologies and epistemologies through software like MidJourney, or I would rather say models like MidJourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, etc., etc., etc. But before we move on, I have to address a couple of cornerstones regarding ideas on artificial intelligence in architecture, or I would say like rumors or concepts or things that are currently happening that are demonstrating sort of a seismic shift within cultural production. So what would be the impact of artificial intelligence on culture, generally speaking? In the contemporary discourse, the emergence of artificial intelligence methodologies has manifested a transformative influence upon the landscape of creative expression. So in recent years, for example, we have witnessed a really fast integration of these innovative methods within various artistic areas. For example, visual arts, fashion, music, literature, and of course, architecture is also part of this seismic shift. I would say it's really like a crucible of a variety of different interdisciplinary collaborations that you can observe very often between computational ingenuity, design innovation, and so on. And as guardians of the built environment, architects find themselves on the vanguard of this rapid change, navigating this dynamic interplay between tradition and innovation, intuition and computation. So it seems that also this shift, this change has triggered a renaissance within architectural discourse, fostering a dialectic synthesis of human ingenuity and computational prowess. So how does AI affect architecture, like on a very pragmatic level? What you see here is a diagram which was published by Goldman Sachs in March 2023, so more than a year ago, which shows a selected number of areas of economic production reaching from the building industry to healthcare, to management, to business, etc. And it includes architecture and engineering. And what you see here is the prediction model has said that over the next decade, architecture will be affected with over 37% of the work market in architecture, meaning that every third job will be impacted by this new development. I would like also to say and warn, this does not mean that a third of the architecture jobs will disappear. This only means that they will change. So how do we change the culture of our own discipline? How do we specifically discuss aspects of artificial intelligence and this sort of technical but also cultural paradigm shift within our own work and ideas? What I've done with a group of other colleagues over the last couple of years was creating platforms for discussions on AI and architecture in the form of books, presentations, lectures, symposia, colloquia, exhibitions, etc., to really try to manifest what's currently happening or what happened since the, let's say, second spring of AI that started in the early 2000s actually, but really became volatile in the last 2-3 years. Another one of the cornerstones of this debate is, why do we need to demystify artificial intelligence in architecture? But the most amount of people see currently things like this: ChatGPT, MidJourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion. But under the water surface of this giant iceberg, there's like a ton of models that are highly interesting for what we do as architects. Things like diffusion models, where we talk about this, graph CNN, YOLO, feature detection, 3D GANs. There's so much more. Yeah. So, for example, radiance fields and things like that. So there's like a lot of really interesting things happening that can help us as architects to do more than just image generation, but really also go into things like optimization and prediction. And all of this is supported by what's underneath here in the lowest part of the iceberg, which is the data sets. Radiance neural fields, that's what I wanted to say. All right. Now we're going to talk about a bit about diffusion models, generally speaking. So this is a project that my office SPAN did in 2020, which is sort of like one of the first attempts to use an AI model that is basically trained on using natural language to produce images. This was something called attentional GAN back then, and it was rather crude in comparison to what we can do today, but it still served its purpose as something that triggered the first ideas about the project through a variety of different color fields, but also just by finding methods of how to do this in 3D, because of course these were all just pixel images that we got out of this attentional GAN, which is basically trained also on large-scale data sets like other diffusion models we know, but this one was trained on COCO, which is the common objects in context. The interesting part here is that we learned in this project that these models were able to create the exterior of a project, but not the interior at the same time. So we had to find a method of how to compress the asked program into this competition, which basically we decided to do very pragmatically. So we turned around the roles, so to speak. We somehow took the inspiration from the AI model to do this very colorful, very playful, very highly articulated architectural objects. And at the same time, we took the role as moderators of the interior of what's happening here by pragmatically and simply putting together the program on the inside. In early 2022, I heard for the first time the term disco diffusion, which was one of the first models that somehow popped up in Google Colab that you were able to use by simply prompting with language. It was quite an interesting thing. This was one of the first things I did, was the sort of endless plan generator, which of course, comparatively speaking, is a profoundly naive approach to the problem, but nonetheless, I think it was a good point to do that. Why are we architects so obsessed with things like MidJourney and DALL-E and so on? I think one of the reasons lies in the methodology that we generally use to design, which is work through iterations. This here is a selection of 28 models created by hand at the office of Hans Hollein in 2004, exploring various design directions for a high-rise building in Vienna, the Saturn Tower. This idea of iteratively working through the process and comparing the results next to each other to find better solutions is something that is very much embedded in our discipline. Just think of, for example, an architect iteratively working through sketches of plans over and over again until he finds a solution to a particular programmatic problem. What models, AI models like MidJourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion do is basically they amplify that notion. So instead of having like 4, 5, or 10, or 28 variations, as we saw like in the models of Hans Hollein, you get thousands of variations very quickly. I made a calculation in 2022 that from April 2022 to August 2022, I generated 73,423 images in MidJourney, and I'm not even a power user. There were people who did this even much more. But it shows that, you know, this idea of iteratively going from version to version to version to version, find something that somehow will trigger your conceptual, intellectual, artistic nerve as a designer. I think that's one of the things that makes it so attractive. This is a piece of art that we did for the MAC in Vienna in 2023, which contains 20,264 AI generated images to create this sort of gradient of color. The number is not random. The number 20,000 something images was selected because this piece of art is about 5 meters by 5 meters, backlit vinyl. And in order to make each one of these pixels of this image, which is basically one of the images in the data set, readable, it had to have a specific size. Otherwise, it becomes too small and you cannot see it anymore. The number 20,264 gives us exactly pixels in the size of about a post stamp. And that was big enough to recognize what it is. Let's have a little look under the hood of what these diffusion models actually do. Around 2015, there were enough annotated images in a variety of different data sets that allowed to create a model that automatically creates an image caption, meaning it recognizes a variety of different features in the image and then can propose a caption. For example, people walking on a bridge. So that would have been the suggestion of the model for the image on the left side. Very quickly, somebody came up with the idea and said, wait a second, what happens if we turn that around? What happens if we just say people walking on a bridge and then the machine generates an image, right? This person was Elmar Mansinov and his colleagues at Amazon Web Services who came up with this idea. And of course, they right away published a paper called Generating Images from Captions with Attention, which was published in 2016. In this first paper, so these are like the images from that paper. You see like the images and the prompts. So the prompt was a stop sign is flying in blue skies, a herd of elephants flying in the blue skies, a toilet seat sits open in the grass field, a person skiing on sand and cloudless desert. If you squint your eyes, you probably can recognize some of the things in the generated images. One of the major problems very early with image generation was that the size of the image for generation was limited to 72 by 72 pixels, which is not that much to make something with high detail and contrast and so on and so forth. But this is a number that comes from machine vision, and in machine vision, this is sufficient to recognize some features. What happens in the diffusion model is that it starts to add noise to one of the data sets. So basically, it's starting to, in a way, destroy or disassemble the information until it's pure noise. And then, following a Markov chain, it can basically reassemble those pixels based on the information in the prompt that you give it. So kind of like this. It's kind of decomposing the data by adding noise, 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 until it's just pure random noise. And then from there, it starts to restructure the data from complete noise, from random noise, to something that iteratively becomes sharper, sharper, sharper. And this is also something that is important because it's a denoising step. Those are denoising steps. Yeah. It also, of course, calculates the probability for perturbated data following a particular score function. So basically, denoise, 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 until it becomes something that is readable. From this, basically, to this. It's also, I mean, I used it, for example, also for the graphic design of the book. I just basically prompted MidJourney in June 22, I think, July 2022, asking what a book would look like about architecture and diffusion models. And it really came up with some quite interesting and beautiful solutions. And I just picked up a couple of those and translated them into an InDesign file. That's basically how the design of the book happened. The funny thing is that making those MidJourney images took me maybe half an hour, maybe an hour maximum. The translation of those ideas present in the images to a nicely working, well-made InDesign file took a week. So you see there's still like this disparate between generation of something quickly and then like making a product out of it. It's two different things. And this is basically the resulting book, which came out in May this year. It is 20 architects or 4 theorists writing about the phenomenon that we experienced between 22 and 23. So what is the book about? So Diffusions in Architecture delves into the impact of generative AI models and their effect on architecture design and aesthetics. The book presents an in-depth analysis of how these new technologies are revolutionizing the field of architecture and changing the way architects approach their work. The architects presented in the book focus on the application of specific AI techniques and tools used in generative design, such as diffusion models, DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, MidJourney, etc. It discusses how these techniques can generate synthetic images that are both realistic and imaginative, creating new possibilities for architectural design. Oops. Wait, do you still see my screen? Just a quick question.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. It discusses how these techniques can generate synthetic images that are both realistic and imaginative, creating new possibilities for architectural design and aesthetics. So basically, it takes, in the book, there is something called the taxonomy of diffusions, which basically traces back some of the original early models, and then it goes on to divide what these models can generate into a variety of different conceptual frames that I put into the book in order to organize the content of the different contributors. That allows you to basically create something that is very human. Because if you think about it, what machines do is they sort, right? Humans, they basically, other way around. Machines search and humans sort. That's the idea. So in order to create a frame, I had to sort a variety of different ideas into boxes that allows us to understand them and comprehend them a bit better. And the first box is suppositions with contributions by Mario Carpo, Bart Lootsma, Sandra Manninger, Ryan Vincent Manning, and Joy Knoblauch, who all delivered timely, exciting, and provocative text engaging with the problem at hand. So suppositions are the silent assumptions that live beneath the surface of any hypothesis, theory, or model. They are the enigmatic propositions that guide the trajectories of our conceptual frameworks and provide a foothold for further interrogation. Suppositions are like threads woven into the fabric of theories, often hidden from plain sight, but nonetheless shaping the texture and structure of our intellectual constructs. They are the starting point of our investigations, the launching pad for our journey. In their ambiguity and uncertainty, suppositions are testament to the elusive nature of knowledge itself. The suppositions in this book are hunches, haruspices, premonitions of a field in motion. The next one is commorances, another one of those boxes that helps humans sort data. I have to thank Kory Bieg, Sumin Ham, Hanjun Kim, Marco Vanucci, Alicia Nachmat, Vasquez for their contributions. I was surprised how many architects actually at the end of the day delivered really thoughtful, inspiring text on the topic instead of just images. This was really interesting to me. In the taxonomy of synthetic imaginations, commorances refer to a collection of architectural entities that can be inhabited, such as houses, dwellings, residences, abodes, domiciles, down to temporary shelters. It is an archaic term that allows to stretch and bend the meaning of inhabitation and use it as an elastic envelope for the examples seen in this segment of the book. The morphing abilities of the term also allows a translation that means place of residence or simply place. The strange places in this chapter evoke a sense of spatiality, as it would occur in a physical environment. even if the images are made based on numerical data present in the RGB values of the pixels. As much as these places are reduced to images at the moment, there is no doubt that this imagery will spill over into our physical reality sooner than later. Yet place never becomes merely parasitic regarding its architectural properties, nor is it just a byproduct of powerful image generators. It retains its own features and fate, its own local being, regardless of being actual or virtual. There's a plethora of thinkers who have found new trajectories for the idea of place. All of these thinkers share the fundamental understanding that place is not a static condition, but rather a dynamic and constantly changing entity. This concept applies to a range of contexts, including the course of history, as noted by Fernand Braudel and Michel Foucault, the natural world, as explored by Wendell Berry and Gary Snyder, the political realm, as discussed, for example, by Jean-Luc Nancy and Henri Lefebvre, gender relations and sexual difference, as examined by Luce Iguaret, poetic imaginations, as studied by Gaston Bachelard and Rudolf Otto, geographic experience and reality, as analyzed by Michel Foucault, Yi Fu Tuan, Edward Sawyer, David Simon, and Edward Ralph, the sociology of the polis and the city, as observed by Walter Benjamin, Hannah Arendt, and Louis Mumford, nomadism, as described by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, and architecture, as explored by Jacques Derrida, Peter Eisenman, and Bernd Schumi. In the taxonomy of synthetic imagination, vestures take the position of working through the problem of the envelope, the exterior, the facade, the frontage, or the wrapping of an object. I would like to thank Daniel Bolohan, Nicola Casas, Daniel Köhler, Andrew Cutlass, Sina Mustafavi, Asma Mehan, Rasa Navasatite, Igor Pantic, and Dustin White for their contributions. Generally speaking, vestures refers to clothing or attire, especially when it is considered as a symbol of rank or status, coronation robes, regalia, chasubles, dalmatics, casayas, etc. It can also refer to the covering of a particular object or surface, such as a building or a piece of furniture. To this extent, this chapter examines the tendency of diffusion models to lend atmospheres and moods to the imagery, as an analogy to layers of fabric, leaning towards the painterly and the cinematic in its appearance, embellishing the vestures of architecture. Vestures in architecture function, semiologically speaking, like a true mythology of architectural design. Because the architectural signified is objectified, thickened, visually materialized in blobs of pixels, that architecture becomes a mythos of language, in the sense of mythos being tied to a traditional or recurrent theme or plot. It is akin to the way the vestures in this chapter are generated through the use of recurring language prompts, trying to describe architectural phenomena. So it is in this mythology of architectural design that we can hear the echoes of the future. One could also say it's utopia. Architecture, similar to fashion, as for example described by Roland Barthes, serves as a semiotic system through which we communicate with the world around us. The images in this chapter speak to us in a language that is both defamiliarized and particular, expressing the values, desires, and aspirations of sometimes unparticular times and strange places. Simultaneously, the process of tunneling through the minds of architecture history in the form of gigantic image datasets. By studying this language, we can begin to understand the deeper meanings and implications of the visual structures of these images. Estrangements. The concept of estrangement in architecture exists within the interstices of the recognizable and the defamiliarized, the known and the enigmatic, the ordinary and the evocative. It is a complex and nuanced phenomenon that eludes easy comprehension, necessitating a deep exploration of the language of architecture, its forms, materials, and spaces. I would like to thank Cesare Batelli, Immanuel Coe, Elena Manfredini, Sandra Manninger, Virginia Sanfratello, and Kyle Steinfeld for their excellent contributions. The project in this section lives happily in this territory of interrogation. At its core, estrangement serves as a means to challenge assumptions about the world we inhabit. It involves unraveling our perception of architecture, built and unbuilt, pushing beyond the boundaries of our habitual understanding and allowing us to see the world in a new light. This idea is not new and has been explored by philosophers and thinkers throughout history. Hegel's examination of estrangement is a tool of self-reflection. Karl Marx's alienation of the working force. Jacques Lacan's charting of the unsettled territory between the conscious and the unconscious. Theodor Adorno's musings about the contradiction and alienation of modern society. Essential for interrogating the projects presented in this book are the concepts presented by thinkers and artists such as Sigmund Freud's analysis of the uncanny, Viktor Shklovsky's Ostranienie, Bertolt Brecht's Verfremdungseffekt. In the realm of visual arts, Mario Klingemann, Felix McCormick, a trained architect by the way, and Sofia Crespo, their art offer compelling examples of estrangement. Klingemann's use of machine learning algorithms to create surrealistic images challenges conventional ideas about the role of technology in artistic production. On the other hand, McCormick's and Crespo's AI-generated menageries of strange animals, such as the Neural Zoo series, presents an otherworldly aesthetic that defies easy classification. However, estrangement is not limited to artistic expression. It can also serve as a powerful force for social and political change, by challenging our presumptions about the world and inspiring us to imagine new possibilities, as for example described by Katja Hogenbohm. In this sense, it is a tool for subversion, a means of disrupting dominant narratives that shape our lives and opening up new spaces for creativity and innovation. Epilogue. There are probably a million ways to end this book. This is directly quoted from the book. But let me end with a little story. Walter Gropius of Bauhaus fame could not sketch at all, not a bit. At the start of his career, working in Peter Behrens' office, Gropius kept this handicap a secret. Despite this setback, Gropius persevered in the Behrens' office and eventually became known for his ability to dictate drawings to his collaborators, proving the power of language to convey the intricate material and spatial relationships in architectural projects. This notion of description was further expanded upon by Sol LeWitt, who dedicated his entire career to the potency of language in the form of instructions, presaging the emergence of programming and scripting as a means of artistic and architectural expression. The synergy between language and architecture is complex and multifaceted, yet it is clear that language has the ability to convey abstract concepts and facilitate collaboration, offering a powerful tool in the design process. To this end, this book attempted to shed light on the murky shadows of diffusion models by exploring the relationship to language and the architectural imagination. It seems unmistakable to contemplate on the ways in which language, prompting, and the theoretical perceptions of thinkers like Wittgenstein, Shklovsky, and Foucault have fashioned our view upon technologies, aiding in the imaginative process. Throughout the course of this book, we have also examined the notions of commerances, vestures, and other stuff, underscoring the vital relationship between the built environment and the individuals who inhabit it. By utilizing diffusion models to comprehend and analyze how people interact with their surroundings, designers can conceive more human-focused designs that enhance the lives of those who inhabit them. One of the key concepts we have explored is the idea of estrangement, or defamiliarization, a technique used by Viktor Shklovsky to make the familiar seem strange in order to prompt new ways of seeing and thinking. Looking towards the future, it is clear that artificial intelligence will continue to play an increasingly important role in the field of architecture design. As AI models become more advanced and sophisticated, designers will have access to an unprecedented level of information, enabling them to create buildings, neighborhoods, and cities that are more responsive to the needs and desires of their users. However, while AI can offer valuable insights, it is ultimately up to the designer to make the final decision and bring their vision to life. By combining the power of AI models with human creativity and intuition, we can create a future of architecture that is both technologically advanced and deeply human centered. The end.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Matthias, for this amazing presentation, and can't wait to have the book in my hands. So I will ask for it this week, so I can read it more deeply and to know all the new things that you're doing, and also the new insights that this look of the diffusion models has. So it's very important to have you here for the people to listen to your work. So thank you very much for being here. So I'm going to start with some questions. I think maybe we have some questions from the audience. And so I have a kind of I'm going to start from the beginning of the lecture. So I have a general question about when you talk about the tip of the iceberg. So in the context of this very fast changing environment we have right now, the AI environment and the development of new tools and new technologies, you mentioned that the current understanding of the AI of architecture is only the tip of the iceberg. So I really agree with you in that sense. So can you elaborate what lies beneath the surface, and how deeper the knowledge of AI can transform architectural practice, and how you see AI, particularly diffusion models, transforming the architectural industry in the next decade, maybe? If it's possible, maybe to know, because it's changing so fast that maybe we don't know it. But what specific changes or advancements do you predict, and will have the most significant impact?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Fede. So I would say, first, let me clarify that I think we're currently experiencing two different speeds of development, not one. So what's happening on top of the surface, on the tip of the iceberg, like all these super prominent models like ChatGPT and MidJourney and so on, they're being developed very fast because there's a lot of money getting pumped into these models. And that, of course, facilitates progress and facilitates further development of these models. Now, under the surface, there are models that are not so easy to be used, like ChatGPT or MidJourney, that you just type in a couple of things and we go. No, this needs a little bit more effort, right? So a little bit of scripting skills, especially a lot of collaboration with other disciplines. So architects have to work with computer scientists and roboticists and data scientists to really make a progress there. To talk to you about what this means for architecture when we start really to engage with these models that we're currently not really talking so much about, but that are highly interesting. Like, for example, energy-based models, which are amazing in prediction, for example. This is one of the major tools we can use in architecture. Imagine you could predict how a city is going to develop in the next 100 years, and being able to do this really precisely and with a lot of certainty, right? So this example alone is great, but I'm talking here about any form of prediction you might want to have. Like, for example, you design a building and you have a model that precisely predicts how the structure of the building has to be, and gives you on top of it maybe variations, like the variations that are showed of this model. It gives you a variation of the structure, or it can optimize towards other goals within your building design, like the least amount of material consumption, the maximum efficiency in energy use. And on top of it, what is also cool is that, as I see it, what is going to be quite interesting for architecture is that AI models cannot be applied just in one part of the architecture process of designing. It can be applied actually to the earliest part of the design process, which you see already happening with MidJourney right now. Like, a lot of architects are trying to use that as an ideation tool, right? So you can use it as something to start a design with. But then you go to, let's say, some form of generative adversarial network that can take those images, transform them into 3D models, optimize the structure, optimize the material consumption, optimize the way that it operates, in the sustainability. But then we go on. After that, we build it. So we're optimizing the materials, the way of we are distributing the material on the construction site. We can use robots on the construction site that are using maybe AI and machine vision for certain things. So it goes into construction. Then after that, we have the lifetime of the building, right? So we basically can start collecting data from, let's say, the first 4 years or 3 years of the building. And based on that data, we can predict how the building is going to perform in the next 20, 30 years, or maybe 100 years of its lifetime. And we can optimize also that lifetime achievement. So trying to really make the building perform through the time as good as possible. And then it comes the end of lifetime of the building, which means we have to demolish it, right? Okay, what if we use machine vision, machine learning to have machines that sort the materials, make them better, prepared for recycling, etc., etc. So you see, every single step of an architectural project can be affected by artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I was like, I kind of realized more or less of a percentage of the work that we do in the offices of architectural office or practices. Then 37%, it's a lot of the things we do every day. So I think that is changing, like, in a way that obviously sometimes we don't realize, but I think that's it's a very impact. It's a big impact in the practices. So we're gonna have in the way that money start going into those developments of the new tools for architecture. I think it's gonna be like very, very not scary, because I'm happy not happy but not scared of it. But I think it's gonna be amazing to be in the, like, to study and to keep studying these new models and these new tools. So, well, to go more into your presentation and so I have a question right now, more specific on sorry, I'm going to go back to the iceberg stuff, but I like the way you put the data sets under it. So I have a question about that. So given the critical role of the data in training diffusion models on every model, so how important do you believe it is to develop highly curated data sets specifically for architecture, in the sense of, I don't know, floor plans or specific floor plans for different kind of buildings, or or different stuff, or facades or envelopes or different stuff? How would such database contribute to the development of more precise and controllable models?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have like a variety of different flavors happening here, depending on which kind of goal you have. So, for example, if your goal is to really optimize the best possible social housing apartment, you would have to collect, like, if possible, all apartment floor plans for social housing in the world and put them into a data set so that the machine can basically learn the main features of it. Also, you have to have a ton of people annotating those plans, just, making sure that the machine understands what's a living room, what's a sleeping room, what's a toilet. And then on top of that, you have to give it you have to like, what's it called again? You have to describe the quality of it. So let's say from 1 to 5, how good is this apartment plan? And for that, basically, you need architects and architecture students working on that. You cannot do that with somebody who has no idea about architecture. This would be the main difference between what's happening, for example, in such large data sets, such as the Lion data set, which is the one that MidJourney is using, or the most famous one being like the first one, what was again called the very first large data set, something net, doesn't matter. So unqualified people basically were annotating photographs because everybody recognizes a person or a zebra or a mountain, right? But not everybody will recognize in a plan what's the difference is between a pantry and a toilet. Yeah. So these are things that are important, that we actually sort of encapsulate a certain amount of our own expertise into the data set, but only part of it, because the idea would be, of course, that once you have that clear, the machine learning process will learn from that and start to annotate on its own later plans. But it's getting way too nerdy, so I'm gonna like roll that a little bit back.
Okay. Yes.
Data sets are essential, and architects have to understand that that's the basis for everything, in short. Great.
Thank you. I have no problem with getting a little bit more specific, but I think it's good to keep it on the ground. So
Yeah.
next question is about the taxonomies you talk about. I think it's very interesting, the categories you give to the book and in the terms of diffusion models. So when you give us the categories of the taxonomy of diffusions, I'm guessing that you're speaking just for the diffusion models and specifically. So in that sense, which could be the limitations of the diffusion models to create new categories and in the taxonomy of to perform in different aspects of architectural design?
I mean, there's always this question: what does new mean? This is always a bit problematic because, like for example, just to give you a reason why I'm really very hesitant to use the term new when it is about anything that AI generates, because of the problem that AI is basically generating things based on existing data points. So what it can do is basically interpolate between these existing data points and create things that might look maybe strange to us or different. That's why I talk about estrangement and defamiliarization, all of this, because I'm looking for those effects in the results that the machine produces intentionally. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that, like from the purely mathematical and philosophical point of view, it's not doing anything new. The only thing that's happening is that we're starting to look into areas of the latent space that were hidden to us. So it's called latent. So they were hidden to us, humans. But now we have a tool that allows us to look into these sort of dark corners of the latent space where like really cool things happen, like, you know, very interesting morphologies, like variations of programmatic thinking, maybe strange ways of using material. So we're finding those things in the latent space that we might have come up with at some point as humans, but it takes us longer, or it takes some genius to come up with that. Now we basically can just mine for these goodies, so to speak, for these jewels in that large latent space. So I don't think it creates something new, but I think it shows us things we couldn't see before. In that extent, it's like a microscope or a telescope, right? But nonetheless, it still maintains the possibility to find a novel aesthetic or a novel way of thinking about space. And that's what excites me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Speaking of the taxonomy, so what I found really interesting that I think it was on purpose. Like then when you speak about estrangement, you don't speak about objects or things. You just speak about authors or just people that writes, or to not necessary. They use language, but it don't use images. So it was very interesting that specific and the estrangement you use Lovecraft or Freud or other authors. I think it was on purpose, not to differentiate between the image generation and the possibility of this novelty in a way, or maybe the transform of the reality right now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very important to create this sort of free space for the reader where he can like project his own thoughts into this problem, or his own like his aesthetical ideas or visual ideas into the problem, because I didn't want to write a text that says architect A did this, architect B did this, architect C did this, and he used this prompt in this way or that way. I think this is profoundly boring. And it doesn't really contribute to the conversation. It's just a description of a method, right? It's not a discussion. It's not a discursive idea. What I try to do is create a discursive idea around what these images are doing and how they basically create a very specific ontology, and how we as humans interpret those images in a very specific epistemological way. And so this for me, and that's why I'm saying that this is not just a technical revolution that we're currently experiencing. I think it's also very much something that will alter the way we think about architecture. And I'm sure I'm not the one who's going to really find it out at the end of the day, but I'm trying to like at least try to dig into the problem and see if there's a way of how I can describe this in a particular language. And a lot of the philosophers and concepts in the book really deal with language. Primarily, like there's like, you know, people like Wittgenstein and Bart and so on, and even like Wittgenstein, Sigmund Freud was of course very interested in language, yeah. But also at the same time, how do you that would be like on the part of producing images through prompting. That's the language part. But then on the other hand, how do you describe these sometimes very strange results that are surreal and beautiful and provocative? So I try to create somehow a language also to describe that. So I'm not only describing the problem from its lingual, semiological point of view, but really from the how do I describe the language of the images that are produced by that. And by the way, this has changed already since I did the book, because the book was pretty much finished early 23, I think. Yeah, maybe March 23, it was finished. In the meantime, we have a ton of other higher developed diffusion models, like MidJourney has become better and better and better all the time, which is a problem, in my opinion, because these highly evolved, slick new diffusion models are just boring. They don't do anything that is weird and strange, and it doesn't have accidents like you have like 10 fingers on one hand and things like that. Yeah, which are beautiful, wonderful occurrences. Yeah,
True.
Yeah, coming deep from the underbelly of the latent space of MidJourney.
Well, that's true. It actually is like they will get better and better to do the things that we already know. So
yeah, exactly. So
maybe it's because what not just the market, but the people needs, or not need, but the people want to see. No, they don't want to see a finger
exactly.
like next to the other.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly why. That's exactly why.
Yeah, we have an opportunity now to keep like exploring this in a way that is like right now we gotta just mix in between the like we are in between the software development and to using a tool, but in the way it's in the middle, like we don't have a closed product. So that's amazing. In this, we're living in an amazing time. So I have a question from Santiago. He's asking is there some precise concept or problem of architecture that could be elaborated, or it is being elaborated right now through AI process that you know about? I'm thinking, for example, how Greg Lynn's embryological houses work with the problem of the ideal villa through the techniques of continuity and variation back in the 90s.
Yeah, I think this is really a different thing right now, because it's not so much about a particular, like when Greg worked with animation, there was of course like a tool that could create metaballs and stuff like that, and that basically provoked him to create this sort of curvilinear, roundish, blobby language, which is fine. But what's happening right now is so different to what they were trying to do back then, because they basically tried to combine this sort of language with continuity with a couple of other concepts like, Gilles Deleuze and Kiesler and stuff like that, right? So this was a very, very different way of thinking. I don't think it's about continuity, by the way, in diffusion models at all. I think this is something that has to do with historic disruption, I would say. It's like taking historical data and completely disassemble the data and put it back together into something that reminds you of that original data, but it's different nonetheless. So in what we're doing now, it has much more to do with features that we architecturally recognize. So if you're talking about a specific architectural problem that this thing is working on, it's basically taking specific conventional features in architecture, like a facade with holes or columns or corner problems or rustications, like all these sort of things that we know from architecture very well, specific proportions and so on. So these are like all things that we know very well in architecture, but that a diffusion model, or actually I would say any interesting AI model, can take and wrangle through a variety of different filters that allows it to come out at the end of this pipeline as something that you still recognize as architectural in a way, but has enough estrangement to provoke you as the viewer. And I think that's why there is like this connection between what AI models produce and why I talk so much about estrangement and defamiliarization. It's because you still can recognize it as a very specific architectural object. It has a certain proportion, it has like cantilevers and so on. It has like, stripes of window, very modern in a way. But then suddenly you have like a super strange coarse surface. You have like this strange connection to the ground. So this whole problem of figure ground, for example, starts to dissolve into something completely alien. And this is what I'm interested in. Is this familiar enough to be recognized, but strange enough to provoke you as the viewer of it? And I think this is a huge difference to previous architectural concepts. The only parallel that I see in a really weird way, and I don't like to talk about that too much, is there is similarities to postmodern techniques, yeah, of collage and so on. This is what we're doing now. We're basically doing collage on the level of the pixel, yeah, on the scale of the pixel. Does this answer your question, Santiago?
Yes.
I'm not sure. It probably would be like a whole evening just talking about that. It's a great question.
Yes. So, okay, Matthias, I think we're on time. So I have no more questions, and we don't have any more questions from the audience. So no, I want to thank you for your time and to kindly present your book and your work. Very interesting work. I was following for a long time. So I hope we can keep speaking and talking and invite you to the Institute. So thank you very much for your time and for you made to be here today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.